I open my sermon today with a reading by the Reverend Chris Rothbauer, Deciding to Build. I served with Chris in Louisville, Kentucky for 2 years. The first time I was told I was too queer to be a congregation's minister, they asked, "What will the neighbors think?" As if that's the most natural question in the world. It was then that I understood how grace works. It's costly. It reminds us to be uncomfortable, to get outside our to go all in. I decided that day I didn't want a wishy-washy faith, one that uses me to signal virtue. We're so enlightened. We support marriage. It's a contest to see who can hold the most correct positions, and not my life we're talking about. Where were they when a trans woman was murdered in Montgomery, or a queer couple was denied the right to adopt children, or when Congress failed yet again to pass an employment non-discrimination act that would keep people like me from being fired just for who we are? Or when a teenager, despondent with their parents, when their parents told them to get the hell out of their house, took an overdose of antidepressants. I don't want a faith that cares more about what the conversations of neighbors might be. Those neighbors who would never join us anyway. Think more that caring about affirming my humanity, who understand that throwing your lot in with marginalized people requires more than talking about your friendship with the lesbian couple down the street. I don't want a faith that wordsmiths my truth, that asks why it's necessary to use the words that best describe my experience as a queer person. I don't need help finding alternative words that might go over better with strangers. I need my siblings in faith to notice their discomfort in hearing about my experiences and use it as a catalyst to action rather than a way to cement their own comfort. I want a faith that doesn't consider me as a queer minister, but rather does its damnedest to live up to our professed values. I want a faith that centers my voice and others like me when necessary, that doesn't think of decades of marginalization can be erased with a few good deeds. I want a faith that claims to be universalist, but consistently judges some of us for sin and not conforming. That's not the ideas of who we should be. Instead, I want this faith. I want to build this, and I'll do it with my own 2 hands if I have to. If I pick up some friends along the way, maybe we'll just be able to build something spectacular together. Again, these words are from my dear friend and colleague, the Reverend Chris Rothbauer. And it brings lots of feelings and thoughts to my mind every time I read it. The first is, hell yes, I don't want a casual faith that checks boxes. Active faith that is capable of living into our values. A faith that can understand and embrace that gender expression and sexual orientation are 2 separate things. But what they have in common is body autonomy, where a person can express their gender outwardly without question or condemnation, or a person can be sexually attracted to any gender expression regardless of some checkbox or social marker. But there is this third piece to it for me. These same freedoms cross over randomly drawn social lines as well. Self-expression and body autonomy rights and freedoms are women's rights. They are adoption rights, abortion rights, racial equity rights, disability rights, and so many more things. All of those rights, all of these rights our LGBTQIA plus rights. Because none of us are free until all of us are free. And so all of these things are very much on my mind as I prepare to go to the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly. For those of you who have never been or don't know, General Assembly, commonly UA, is where we as Unitarian Universalists gather to do the work of the larger association, where this congregation and every congregation in the association gets to vote on how we will be with each other and how we will be in the world. Now, in a pre-COVID world, there would have been 4,000 or 5,000 UUs gathered in person. Now that we're hybrid, that makes it harder to know how many people are present, while at the same time, it makes it possible for all of our congregations to have a voice and those who had trouble traveling to attend. And let me tell you that the experience of being together with thousands of UUs fills one's soul. For those of us with historically marginalized identities, it can be an extremely hurtful place. And I know that may sound like I misspoke, but it's really true. See, the UU community at large is simply a micro version of the greater world. And yet we get lulled into thinking that this UU bubble that we live in will hold everyone well. How many of you have ever been in a room where your presence seemed like it was being overlooked? Where you felt invisible? Because I know I have, even in UU community. I think most of us have at one time in our lives. Even if you are a member of the dominant culture and gender presentation and ruling class, seems to get by with everything. So let's take this to the next level. Can you imagine sitting in a space where your presence is openly asked for? Where you're not just invited, but expected to be there. But when you get in that room, your world is up for debate and discussion. And there's a vote to determine the amount of inclusion or welcome to be extended. Are you uncomfortable? This was our General Assembly 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where we as UUs actually debated trans identity on the floor. Now, we moved to a place where those of us who really understood said, that's not acceptable. And we set out to work. But here's what I want you to sit with this morning. It's our nation's trauma right now. On the White House added transgender people to their official list of terrorists. Not as rhetoric, not as a tweet. It didn't come as a tweet. The White House published policy officially on their website, designating transgender people alongside cartels and terror groups, and are promising, in their words, rapid identification and neutralization. Now that's the language of the state. Do I look like a terrorist? Then just this week, the Department of Defense removed Unitarian Universalism from its list of recognized military religions. We are in good company with 180 other progressive religions. We're under attack. Do you know how many UU chaplains serve in the armed forces? We're well suited to serve in that call, holding the complexity of multiple faith traditions and centering everything in love and care for the person. And yet, Unitarian. And I tell you, while the terrorist designation raised little concern, probably because it got by, the fact that we were canceled as a religion has been flying the internet like wildfire. There's a weight to that I want you to take. Because that's the wishy-washy faith that Reverend Chris named. We're outraged and are mobilized around our exclusion of the war machine, but largely silent about our trans siblings being designated enemies of the state. That's what it looks like when we protect our own comfort and institutional standing before we protect the people in our pews. I get it easy because I'm the acceptable one, and I've told you that before. And many of you don't understand my non-binary identity within the transgender umbrella because I've been placed easily into that comfortably acceptable understanding that you hold. To the world, I look like a straight man, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. So what I'm asking you today is not to feel guilty in your ignorance and unawareness or what got by you, right? Don't feel guilty because that's not useful. What I'm asking is that you not turn away from those messages that come to you that seem hard or when you don't know where to begin, because it's never too late to begin. Notice. I'm asking you to notice and let the noticing be your catalyst, because that is what this faith demands of us. Now, I want to assure you, you are not hearing my personal pain, because I am the acceptable one. I am the trans minister who walks and presents as male and Caucasian, who's overly educated and financially stable, whose family didn't abandon me when I came out every time I came out on my journey. So hear me when I say I am the acceptable one, and let it sink in. Because when I enter a room, I'm raised. But you, each of you in this room or online, should be uncomfortable. It is not unknown to you that in recent years, and even more so in recent months and days, that we've seen an uptick in hate crimes and violence against the queer community. The inheritance and worth and dignity has lost its connection with the web of all existence. So how do we connect those back together? How do we connect the needs of one with the needs of the community? We begin with events like Pride. Now, our current American culture often teaches and preaches oppression, and as in your face as the current push of Christian nationalism is, not every tactic to conformity is as in your face. There's this subtle, deeper cultural indoctrination that encourages what we call internalized oppression. They're these small messages, often loud, that are around us every day in all forms of media. They're in the news and in commerce, they're in TV shows and movies and songs and photographs and art. Messages that inform all of us of our personal internal messaging about what's acceptable, how to be. And those messages form us. In queer community is often that they create space for shame and denial and self-hatred and fear, and they will lead to harmful situations where hate and fear lead to self-harm, including death. And yet, we resist by being colorful. Messages of pride encourage us to feel our feelings, to show our anger, to be strong, and to be joyful. But these are also messages of how we might transform hatred into pride, because pride is a fundamental act of resistance. And we need all our allies in pride. In a space, pride as a space that functions the way we want it to, the way we build it. A space that allows room for both witness and pride. It's a place where we witness history, both personally and collectively, and a place where we can feel grief and rage, and a place where we can sing and dance and be joyful, knowing that we're seen in our fullness and loved in our fullness. And it's important that we not let our ability to witness and be proud be conflated with one another, because we can hold the complexity of both. Because that is what true liberation looks like. It's very important in these days for our allies to show their willingness to support pride, to fight for our lives as hard as we fight for our own. So how do we begin? Like marches, educating ourselves. And this morning, I share with you the education and poetry of my colleague, Reverend Otto O'Connor, who beautifully crafted these words to help us name and remember. On a holy night in 1969, in an inn, otherwise or sometimes known as a bar, called the Stonewall Inn, a basement which had no running water, nor safe fire exits, queer people of many colors and kinds danced together, for it was the only place where they were allowed to dance, at least permitted to, by the mafia who ran the inn. In those days, it was common for the police to refrain to frequent this inn, not to join in the dance, the underground celebration, but to send the dancers home and make arrests. When they would arrive, the lights would go on, the people would be lined up, and then drag all those who were trans, all those without proper identification were arrested and taken into custody. But on this holy night, that early morning, June 28th, the people said, "Not tonight." As they called for them to line up, the trans women refused to go. And as the police began to beat and arrest them, and as people spilled out from the bar onto the street, Christopher Street, a crowd grew to watch. And then a trans woman, lesbian, and gay men, as they were getting arrested, yelled, "Gay power." As the trans woman was shoved, she shoved back, and the crowd began to throw bottles at the wagon, and suddenly it erupted. For once, the people didn't line up. For once, the people said, it was almost as if that night, being pulled out of the darkness of the underground at the Stonewall Inn, one too many times they said, "I'm ready to be seen." On this night, when the power of the oppressed rippled through the streets of New York, when queer people said no more, our world would never be the same. Less than 50 years ago, it was illegal to be gay, to be trans, to dance, to love, and to celebrate. And now, we fight to hold on to every small victory, to not be erased. And the irony is, the messaging that is trying to pull us down, most often couched in religion. And yet, here we are, celebrating at church. Gay and straight together, queer and straight together, trans, non-binary, and cis together, all in this together. Friends, so as we hear these stories of life and love and defiance, let us also remember to pay tribute to our movement ancestors, many of them trans women of color who led the first rebellion that night. You see, Pride is a celebration of that anniversary. Pride is a celebration of a riot at the Stonewall Inn in New York City, a holy night. So happy Pride. Welcome to a month of joyful celebration and tears. Bring your whole selves, your gay, your lesbian, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, queer selves, your drag queen, butch and femme, cross-dressing, nail-painting, tutu-wearing selves, your genderqueer, gender-fluid, asexual, pansexual, quilt-bagging selves, and all other identities that are and will be, and let us have a celebration. Because joy is a rebellion too. It's important, my friends, that we not let our ability to witness and be proud become conflated with one another. Because until we have built a community that can hold both, and some of us are building that community with our own two hands, and we find friends along the way, until we have that community to hold both, we have to rely on one another. And there's still room for all of you. We're building a community of resilience, and we're demanding respect for our humanity. Pride, a rebellion of joy and love. Say it loud.